Danny Morrison pushed his cleaning cart down the gleaming corridor of Celestial Harbor, the massive space station that floated between the stars. The floors here were made of something that looked like marble but wasn't from Earth at all. He had been working as a janitor on this station for 8 months now, ever since he left Earth to escape the memories of his dead wife and his empty house. The diplomatic section was always quiet at this hour. Most of the alien ambassadors were either sleeping or attending some fancy meeting somewhere else on the station. Danny liked the quiet. It gave him time to think, or sometimes not to think at all. Just push the mop, wipe the surfaces, and move on to the next corridor. He was halfway through mopping when he heard the shouting. It came from the direction of the Zafrani royal quarters, a set of rooms so fancy that Danny had only cleaned them once, and even then, he had been nervous the whole time. The Zafrani were one of the most important species in the galaxy, and their queen lived here on the station with her young son. A figure came rushing around the corner, and Danny had to quickly move his cart to avoid a collision. It was a Luxian, one of those tall, thin aliens with too many arms. This one wore the purple robes of a professional nanny, but the robes were smoking. Actually smoking, with little wisps of smoke coming off the fabric. The Luxian didn't even look at Danny. She just kept walking, muttering in her own language. Danny caught a few words that his translator implant converted to English. Something about impossible child and never again and cursed. Danny watched her disappear down the corridor, then looked back toward the royal quarters. He shook his head and went back to mopping. This wasn't the first nanny he had seen leaving those quarters in a hurry. In fact, over the past 2 months he had seen quite a few. He had even overheard some of the other station workers talking about it in the break room. 15 nannies, they said. 15 highly trained childcare experts from different species across the galaxy, all hired to take care of Prince Kylan, and all 15 had quit or been fired within days. Some lasted a week. Some lasted only a few hours. The rumors said the prince was wild, violent, possibly dangerous. Some people whispered that maybe there was something wrong with Zafrani children, something that made them impossible to control. Danny didn't believe in impossible children. He had raised his own daughter alone after his wife died from cancer. Those first 2 years had been rough. His daughter had been angry at the world, angry at him, angry at everything. She had screamed and thrown things and hidden in closets, but she hadn't been a bad kid. She had just been hurting. He finished mopping the corridor and moved his cart toward the service elevator. He would come back tomorrow and do it all again. Same floors, same quiet corridors, same escape from the life he used to have. But that night, something changed. Danny was doing his final round of the day, checking the maintenance areas that most people never saw. These were the corridors behind the walls, the places where the station's machinery hummed and clicked. He liked these spaces even more than the diplomatic corridors. Nobody bothered him here. He was checking a junction box when he heard a sound. A small wet sound. Someone was crying. Danny followed the sound around a corner and found a small figure sitting on the floor, wedged between 2 large pipes. It was a child, and even in the dim light, Danny could see the crystalline scales that marked him as Zafrani. The scales were shifting colors, flashing between dark blue and gray. Prince Kylan looked up when Danny approached, and his large eyes went wide with surprise. He clearly expected to be yelled at or dragged back to his rooms. His little tail, which Danny had read could be used like another arm when Zafrani grew older, was wrapped tightly around his own leg. Danny stopped a few feet away and sat down on the floor, his back against the wall. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, giving the child space. "You're not supposed to be here," Kylan finally said. His voice was small and rough from crying. The translator implant made it sound like a human child speaking English. "Neither are you, I think," Danny replied. He kept his voice calm and gentle. "But I won't tell if you won't." Kylan stared at him. "You're the cleaning human. I've seen you, that's right. My name is Danny. Why aren't you scared of me?" The question came out almost like an accusation. "Everyone is scared of me." Danny thought about that for a moment. "Well, you're sitting here crying in a maintenance tunnel. You don't seem very scary to me. You seem sad." Something in Kylan's expression crumbled. More tears spilled down his scaled cheeks. "I miss my father. He died. Everyone wants me to be good, but I don't know how to be good anymore. I try, but then I get angry and I break things, and then everyone hates me." Danny felt a familiar ache in his chest. He knew that feeling. He had lived that feeling. "My daughter used to feel like that," he said quietly. "After her mother died, she was angry all the time. Not because she was bad, but because she was hurting, and she didn't know what to do with all that hurt. "What did you do?" Kylan asked. "I let her be angry. I let her cry. I let her know that I wasn't going anywhere no matter what. And slowly, bit by bit, she started to feel better." Danny paused. It took a long time, though. There's no quick fix for missing someone you love. They sat in silence for a while. Danny didn't try to give advice or tell the child what to do. He just sat there, being present, being calm. Eventually, Kylan's crying slowed down and stopped. "I should go back," the prince said. "Mother will be worried." "Probably," Danny agreed. "Want me to walk with you?" Kylan nodded. They stood up, and Danny noticed that the child's scales had shifted to a softer blue color. They walked together through the maintenance corridors until they reached a service door that led to the royal section. By the time they got there, guards were running everywhere, clearly searching for the missing prince. When they saw Kylan with Danny, they rushed over. One of them, a tall Zafrani with dark red scales, looked at Danny with suspicion. "What happened? Where was he?" "He was exploring," Danny said simply. "We walked back together." Queen Velsera appeared then, and Danny felt his breath catch. She was almost 8 feet tall, with scales that shimmered like jewels even in the corridor lighting. Her face was alien but somehow readable. Danny could see the relief and fear and exhaustion all mixed together. She knelt down and pulled her son into a hug, holding him tight. Kylan hugged her back, and Danny could hear him whispering apologies. The queen looked up at Danny over her son's head, and their eyes met. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was deep and musical. "Thank you for bringing him home." Danny nodded and started to turn away. He had done his good deed. Time to get back to work. "Wait," the queen said. She stood up, still holding Kylan's hand. "Please wait. I would like to speak with you." Danny stood in the queen's private sitting room, feeling very out of place. The room was beautiful in a way that made him nervous. Everything looked expensive and important, and he was very aware that he was wearing his janitor's uniform, with its various stains and worn patches. Queen Velsera sat across from him, with Kylan already tucked into bed in the next room. She looked tired, and her scales kept shifting through different shades of blue and purple. Danny's research into Zafrani culture told him that meant she was feeling multiple strong emotions at once. 15 nannies, she said quietly. "In 2 months, I have hired 15 of the most qualified childcare experts in the galaxy. Kylan has defeated every single one of them." She looked at Danny with those large, intelligent eyes. "But tonight you brought him home calmly, peacefully. How?" Danny shifted in his seat. "I just talked to him. I didn't try to make him do anything or be anything. I just listened. That simple." The queen sounded like she didn't quite believe it. "Sometimes simple is what works," Danny said. Then he added, "Look, I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy who cleaned floors and raised a kid. But I know what it's like when a child is grieving. You can't force them through it. You can only walk beside them." The queen was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised Danny. She asked, "Would you consider helping with my son, just temporarily until I can find a proper nanny?" Danny blinked. "You want me to be a nanny? I don't have any training or certificates or anything like that." "You have something better," the queen said. "You have understanding. My son connected with you in minutes. That is worth more than all the certificates in the galaxy." Before Danny could answer, a door opened and another Zafrani entered. This one was male, with dark green scales and an expression that looked permanently annoyed. He was clearly important based on the formal robes he wore. "My queen," he said, and his tone was respectful but cold. "I must object to this plan. This human is a janitor. He has no credentials, no training in Zafrani culture, no understanding of what it means to raise a prince. This is highly inappropriate." "Thank you for your input, Ambassador Torvan," the queen said, and there was steel in her voice. "But I am still the queen, and I make decisions about my son's care." Torvan looked at Danny like he was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "At least allow me to assign guards to observe him. For the safety of the prince, of course." "Fine," the queen agreed. She turned back to Danny. 1 week. Give me 1 week and we will see if this can work." Danny thought about his quiet life, his simple routine. He thought about how taking this job would complicate everything. Then he thought about a small prince crying in a maintenance tunnel, and he heard himself say, 1 week. I'll try." The next morning, Danny arrived at the royal quarters with a backpack. Inside were the few things he thought might help. A rubber ball, An old picture book his daughter had loved. A deck of cards. Simple things. 2 guards stood inside the quarters watching everything with sharp eyes. Ambassador Torvan sat in a corner with a data pad, ready to record every mistake Danny made. Kylan was sitting on the floor, surrounded by expensive educational toys that he was clearly ignoring. When he saw Danny, his scales shifted to a brighter blue, almost hopeful. "Hi, Kylan," Danny said, sitting down on the floor near him. "What do you want to do today?" The prince stared at him. Every other nanny had arrived with schedules and rules and lessons. "I can choose?" "Sure, it's your day." Kylan's eyes narrowed. This felt like a trick. To test it, he reached out and deliberately knocked over an expensive holographic display. It hit the floor with a crash and pieces scattered everywhere. The guards tensed. Torvan looked up, waiting to see how the human would fail this first test. Danny just looked at the broken display, then at Kylan. "Okay, so breaking things doesn't make you feel better. Good to know. Want to try something else?" Kylan was confused. "You're not going to yell at me?" "Nope, but we should probably clean that up so nobody steps on it." Danny got up and found a container. He started picking up pieces, and after a moment Kylan joined him. As they cleaned, Danny said, "You know what helped my daughter when she was angry? I gave her a ball to throw against the wall. Hard as she wanted, it let out the angry feelings without breaking important stuff." "I can throw things?" Kylan sounded amazed. Danny pulled the rubber ball from his backpack. "This wall here looks pretty solid. Want to try?" For the next 20 minutes, the prince threw the ball against the wall, sometimes hard, sometimes soft. The guards looked baffled. Torvan made many notes on his data pad. But Kylan was smiling, really smiling, and his scales were a bright, happy gold. Later they sat together, and Danny read the Earth picture book. It was about a young dragon learning to fly. The story was simple, but Kylan was fascinated. He made Danny read it 3 times. "We don't have stories like this," the prince said. "Our stories are all about duty and honor and following rules." "Those are important," Danny said. "But sometimes it's nice to hear about someone who's learning and making mistakes. Makes you feel less alone." At lunch, Kylan actually ate his food without throwing it or refusing it. He even tried some Earth food that Danny had brought, making faces at the strange tastes but willing to experiment. In the afternoon, Kylan was supposed to have a language lesson. He hated language lessons. Every other nanny had struggled to make him sit still for them. Danny looked at the lesson plan and had an idea. "How about this?" he said. "You teach me some Zafrani words, and I'll teach you some Earth words. We'll make it a game." "A game?" Kylan tilted his head. "Sure, we take turns. You say a word in your language, I try to repeat it. Then I say a word in English, and you repeat it. First person to mess up has to hop on 1 foot." It was silly, but it worked. They spent an hour teaching each other words, laughing when Danny mispronounced something or when Kylan couldn't quite get the English sounds right. The guards actually smiled. Even Torvan looked slightly less annoyed. By the end of the day, when Queen Velsera returned from her diplomatic duties, she found her son playing a card game with Danny. They were both laughing. Kylan's scales were the bright gold color that meant happiness. She watched from the doorway, afraid to break the spell. Her son looked like himself again. The angry, hurting child had been in there all along, just waiting for someone to see past the tantrums and the broken things. That night, after Kylan was asleep, she called Danny back. "You did well today," she said. "Better than well." "You gave me my son back. He was never gone," Danny said. "He was just lost for a while." The queen smiled, and Danny noticed how it transformed her face. She wasn't just a powerful ruler. She was a mother, relieved and grateful. "The week isn't over yet," Danny said. "We'll see how it goes," but both of them already knew this was going to work. 2 months passed, and the station couldn't stop talking about the miracle worker, the human janitor who had tamed the impossible prince. Danny found the attention uncomfortable, but he couldn't deny that Kylan had changed. The prince attended his lessons without fighting. He made friends with other diplomatic children. He even started to enjoy the formal ceremonies that used to make him scream and hide. Danny still kept his part-time janitorial work. He liked the routine, the simplicity of it. But most of his time now went to Kylan. They had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings were for lessons, but Danny made them fun. Afternoons were for play and exploration. Evenings were for quiet time, stories, and talking about feelings. What Danny didn't talk about were his own feelings. The ones that showed up every time Queen Velsera smiled at him. The ones that made his heart beat faster when she joined them for dinner. The ones that whispered dangerous thoughts about things that could never be. She was a queen. He was a janitor. Different species, different worlds, different everything. It didn't matter that they had started having long conversations after Kylen went to bed. It didn't matter that she laughed at his jokes and listened to his stories about Earth. It didn't matter that sometimes he caught her looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite, for that none of it mattered because some gaps were too wide to cross. Then the delegation arrived. 3 Zephrani nobles came to Celestial Harbor with official orders from the High Council. They had heard about the human caring for the prince and they were not pleased. Ambassador Torvine greeted them with barely concealed satisfaction. He had been sending reports home, making sure the council knew every detail of this inappropriate arrangement. The eldest of the 3 was named Vexnor. He was ancient, with scales that had faded to a dull gray and eyes that missed nothing. With him came Lady Shirana, younger and more open-minded but bound by duty to her people. The 3rd was Commander Zelthar, a military officer who looked at everything like it might be a threat. They called Danny to a formal meeting in one of the station's conference rooms. Queen Velsera was there, sitting at the head of the table, her face calm but her scales shifting through worried colors. Danny sat across from the delegation, feeling like he was on trial. Elder Vexnor spoke first. "We have reviewed the reports. A human with no formal training, no understanding of Zephrani culture, caring for the heir to our empire. This is unprecedented, unacceptable. And yet it works," Queen Velsera said quietly. "Does it?" Commander Zelthar leaned forward. "Or is this human manipulating the prince with unknown methods? Humans are known for their psychological tricks." Danny felt anger rise in his chest but pushed it down. "I'm not manipulating anyone. I'm just treating Kylen like a kid who's been through something hard. Because that's what he is." "You have no credentials," Lady Shirana said. She didn't sound hostile, just confused. "No formal education in child development. No training in our culture. How can you possibly understand what a Zephrani prince needs?" "I understand what a grieving child needs," Danny said. "That part's the same everywhere, isn't it? They need someone to listen, someone to be patient, someone to not give up on them." "Pretty words," Vexenor said coldly, "but insufficient. We will be observing you for the next week. Every interaction with the prince will be documented. Experts will review your methods. We will determine if you are truly suitable or if you are simply lucky." The week that followed was the hardest of Danny's life. The 3 nobles watched everything. They questioned every choice he made. Why did he let Kylen choose activities instead of following a structured schedule? Why did he validate the prince's angry feelings instead of correcting them? Why did he tell Earth stories instead of focusing on Zephrani history? Danny tried to explain his reasoning, but it always came back to the same thing. He didn't have the right credentials. He wasn't Zephrani. He didn't follow established protocols. On the 4th day, they brought in their own experts, child development specialists who lectured Danny about proper techniques and established methods. They made him feel small and stupid, like everything he had done was just luck and coincidence. That night, Danny sat in his small quarters, wondering if he should just quit before they fired him. Maybe they were right. Maybe he had no business caring for a prince. He was just a janitor who had gotten lucky. A message arrived on his communication device. It was from Lisa, his friend from the administration office. She had heard about the investigation and wanted to check on him. They met at the station's observation deck where they could see the stars. "They're trying to break you down," Lisa said. "Because you're making them look bad. 15 experts failed and you succeeded. That's embarrassing for them." "Maybe they're right, though," Danny said. "Maybe I don't know what I'm doing." "Does Kylen think that?" Lisa asked. Danny thought about the prince, about how he smiled now, about how he talked about his feelings instead of breaking things, about how he was learning to be himself and a prince at the same time. "No," Danny admitted. "He's doing great." "Then that's all that matters." The turning point came on the 6th day. The delegation called Kylen in for questioning. They wanted to hear from the prince himself about his experience with the human caretaker. Danny wasn't allowed in the room, but Queen Velsera told him later what happened. The nobles had expected a young child who couldn't give meaningful answers. What they got was a 4-year-old prince who spoke with surprising clarity. Kylen told them about the first night when Danny found him crying. about how Danny didn't treat him like a problem to be solved, about learning to throw the ball when he was angry instead of breaking things, about the stories and games that made lessons fun, about feeling safe enough to talk about his father without being told to stop being sad. Danny doesn't make me be good, Kylan had said. He helps me want to be good. That's different. The nobles were impressed despite themselves. This wasn't a manipulated child. This was a prince who understood what he needed and recognized that he was getting it. That evening, the delegation met with Queen Velsera and Danny one final time. Elder Vexnor looked tired and his scales were a frustrated gray color. We cannot deny the results, he said slowly. The prince is thriving. However, we also cannot ignore the precedent this sets. A human with no credentials caring for our heir? It's embarrassing to our people. Then what do you propose? The queen asked, and there was warning in her voice. Lady Shirana spoke up. A compromise. The human may continue as the prince's companion, but he must receive formal education in Zephrani culture, history, and protocol. We will create a new title for him, one that recognizes his unique position. This way he has official standing. And if I refuse this compromise? Queen Velsera asked. Then we will be forced to recommend that the High Council remove the prince from your care, Vexnor said. For his own good, of course. It was a threat wrapped in politeness. Danny saw the queen's scales flash red with anger, but she controlled it. She looked at Danny, asking a silent question. He nodded. He would do whatever it took to stay with Kylan. We accept your terms, the queen said. The delegation left the next day. Danny was now officially the royal companion to Prince Kylan. He had status, responsibility, and a whole lot of studying to do about Zephrani culture. But he also had something else. As the delegation's ship departed, Queen Velsera touched his hand briefly. Just a moment of contact, but it sent electricity through him. Thank you for staying, she said softly. Danny looked at her and saw the same feelings he was trying to hide reflected in her eyes. They were in dangerous territory now, and they both knew it. 3 more months passed, and Danny's life had changed in ways he never expected. He spent his mornings learning Zephrani history from holographic teachers. His afternoons were still with Kylan, and his evenings had become something he looked forward to more than he wanted to admit. Every night, after Kylan was asleep, Queen Velsera would invite Danny to stay for tea. They would sit in her private sitting room and talk about everything. She told him about the loneliness of leadership, about how she could never truly relax around anyone because she was always the queen first. He told her about rebuilding a life after loss, about the guilt of feeling happy again when his wife was gone. They talked about philosophy and art. They argued about the best ways to raise children. They shared their fears and hopes, and slowly, carefully, they fell in love. Neither of them said it out loud. Neither of them acted on it. But it was there in every glance, every accidental touch, every moment of comfortable silence. It was there in the way her scales turned soft pink when he made her laugh. It was there in the way his heart raced when she entered a room. Danny knew it was impossible. She was a queen of an empire that had existed for thousands of years. He was a human janitor who had stumbled into her life by accident. The gap between them wasn't just wide. It was a canyon, but knowing something is impossible doesn't make the feelings go away. Lisa noticed, of course. She cornered Danny at the observation deck one evening and gave him a look that said she knew everything. You're in love with her, she said. Not a question. A statement. Danny didn't deny it. Doesn't matter. Nothing can happen. Why not? Because she's a queen, Lisa. I clean floors. Well, I used to clean floors. Even with this new title, I'm still just a guy from Earth. She has responsibilities to an entire empire. She's also a person, Lisa said gently. A person who looks at you like you hung the stars. Don't you think she deserves to be happy? Not at the cost of her throne, Danny said. But the universe has a way of forcing issues. It came in the form of a grand gala held on Celestial Harbor. Every important diplomat and noble in the sector was invited. Danny attended because his new position required it, wearing formal clothes that felt strange and uncomfortable. He stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching Queen Velsera move through the crowd. She was magnificent in her ceremonial robes, her scales catching the light like jewels. She was speaking with an important ambassador, playing her role perfectly. Danny knew he should leave. Being here, watching her, only made things harder, but he couldn't make himself move. Then she saw him. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and for a moment everything else disappeared. Her scales shifted to that soft pink color. She smiled just slightly. Just for him. Protocol said she had to open the dancing with the highest-ranking diplomat present. Danny watched her fulfill that obligation, moving gracefully through the formal dance. When it ended, she was supposed to continue dancing with other high-ranking officials. That was how these things worked. Instead, she walked across the ballroom directly toward Danny. The crowd parted. Conversation stopped. Everyone was watching. She stopped in front of him and held out her hand. "Would you dance with me?" she asked. Danny's mind raced. He knew what this meant. Everyone in this room would see. Everyone would know. This would cause a scandal. It could cause political problems for her. "Your Majesty," he said quietly. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," she said. Her eyes held his. "Dance with me, Danny." He took her hand. They moved onto the dance floor and the music started again. Danny had learned some basic Zafrani dances as part of his cultural education, but he was clumsy compared to her grace. It didn't matter. They moved together, and for those few minutes the rest of the galaxy could disappear. "Everyone is watching," he whispered. "I know," she said. Her scales were bright pink now, and she didn't care who saw. "This is going to cause problems. I know that too." She smiled at him. "I'm tired of pretending, Danny. I'm tired of hiding how I feel." Velsera. He had never used her name before, always calling her Your Majesty or my Queen. Using her actual name felt intimate and dangerous. "I love you," she said simply. "I know I shouldn't. I know it's complicated. But I do." Danny's breath caught. "I love you too. But that doesn't change reality. You're a queen. There are rules. Your people have expectations. My people expect me to be miserable for the sake of tradition." Her scales flashed red for just a moment. Perhaps it's time to change some expectations. The dance ended. They stood there for a moment longer, still holding hands while hundreds of beings watched. Then Danny stepped back and bowed formally, and she inclined her head like a queen dismissing a subject. But everyone had seen. Everyone knew. The next day, Ambassador Torvan was furious. He sent urgent messages to the Zafrani High Council. The station gossip networks were on fire. Some people thought it was romantic. Others were scandalized. And the High Council demanded that Queen Velsera return home immediately to explain her conduct. She received the summons in the evening while Danny was there. She read it with her scales shifting through angry reds and frustrated grays. "They're going to make me choose," she said quietly. "Between my duty and my happiness. Between my throne and you." "Then choose the throne," Danny said, though it hurt to say it. "Kylan needs you as queen. Your people need you. What we feel for each other isn't worth all that, isn't it?" She looked at him with those large eyes. "When does duty end and living begin? When am I allowed to be something other than just a queen?" They talked late into the night. They were honest about their love. They were also honest about the costs. Ancient Zafrani law said the queen could only marry nobility. She could have companions, but any formal relationship would require her to give up the throne. And if she gave up the throne, Kylan would lose his right to inherit. He would just be another noble child, not a prince. They decided together to step back, to keep things professional. It was the responsible choice. The selfless one. It was also heartbreaking. Danny prepared to put distance between himself and the queen. He would still care for Kylan, but the evening conversations would stop. The long looks would stop. They would hide their feelings and do their duty. But Kylan had been listening. The 4-year-old prince had noticed everything. He saw how his mother looked at Danny. He saw how happy they were together. And when he learned they were going to stop, he decided to do something about it. The next morning, Kylan was gone. He left a note in careful handwriting saying he didn't want to be a prince if being royal meant the people you love couldn't be together. He had run away. The station went into emergency lockdown. Security searched everywhere. Queen Velsera was frantic. Even Ambassador Torvan looked worried. It was Danny who figured out where the prince had gone. The maintenance corridor. The same place where they had first met, where Kylan had been crying and Danny had simply sat down beside him. Danny found him there, curled up in the same spot between the pipes. Kylan looked up with tearful eyes. "Why do adults always sacrifice happiness for duty?" the prince asked. "Why can't you just be together?" Danny sat down beside him just like that first night. Sometimes life asks impossible things from us, buddy, and all we can do is our best. Your best should include being happy, Kylan said stubbornly. Danny couldn't argue with that, because the prince was right. Danny brought Kylan back to his mother. The reunion was emotional, with Velsera holding her son tight and whispering thank yous to Danny. But the crisis wasn't over. The High Council's ultimatum still stood. The Queen had to return home and end her relationship with Danny, or face questions about her fitness to rule. That night, Lisa came to Danny's quarters with several other humans from the station. They had been doing research, digging through Zephrani law and history. "Look at this," Lisa said, showing him a datapad. "The rule about queens only marrying nobility was made thousands of years ago. It was meant to stop foreign powers from taking over through marriage." "But you're not a foreign power. You're just one guy." "I don't think the High Council will see it that way," Danny said. "Maybe they will if we present it right," another human said. His name was Peter, and he worked in the legal department. "There have been 3 times in Zephrani history when they made exceptions to marriage laws. Each time it was because the match helped the Empire somehow." Danny thought about that. An idea was forming, crazy and probably impossible, but an idea nonetheless. He reached out to Lady Shirana, the younger noble who had been part of the delegation. She had shown some sympathy before. Maybe she would be willing to help. She was. She met with Danny secretly and listened to his plan. Then she smiled. "It's bold. It might work. But you'll need to convince the High Council, and they're not easily swayed." Together with Lisa and Lady Shirana, Danny prepared a formal petition. His argument was simple but powerful. His relationship with Kylan had already helped the Empire by creating a stable, healthy heir. His relationship with the Queen would continue that stability. He also pointed out that humanity was growing in importance in the galaxy, and a connection between humans and the Zephrani Empire could have real diplomatic benefits. But most importantly, he argued that a happy queen was a better queen, that denying her the chance at personal fulfillment served no one. Before Danny could present his petition, something unexpected happened. Kylan asked to address the High Council himself. The nobles were surprised but agreed. A prince, even a young one, had the right to speak to the council. The transmission was broadcast across the station. Danny and Velsara watched together as Kylan appeared on the screen, standing before the assembled council members in their grand chamber on the Zephrani homeworld. The 4-year-old prince looked small but determined. His scales were a steady, confident blue. "Honored council members," he began, his voice clear. "I am Prince Kylan, heir to the Zephrani Empire. I want to talk to you about duty." The council members shifted in their seats, curious where this was going. "Everyone tells me that duty is the most important thing," Kylan continued. "That I have to put my people first always. That being a prince means sacrificing what I want for what others need. I understand that. My father taught me that before he died." He paused, and his scales flickered with sadness for a moment before steadying again. "But Danny taught me something else. He taught me that being a good prince means caring about people. All people. Including yourself. Including your family. If you force my mother to choose between her throne and her happiness, what are you teaching me? That duty means being miserable? That being a good ruler means never getting to live?" The council chamber was silent. Kylan wasn't finished. "I don't want to learn that lesson. I don't want to be the kind of prince who thinks suffering is noble. I want to be the kind of prince who shows his people that you can be strong and kind and happy all at the same time. Danny showed me how to do that. My mother deserves the same chance." Elder Vexnor leaned forward. "You are young, Prince. You don't understand all the complexities. I understand that my mother has been alone since my father died," Kylan said. "I understand that she works every day for our people. I understand that she never complains and never asks for anything for herself. And I understand that she loves Danny and he loves her and they're good together. If you can't see that, then maybe you're the ones who don't understand." The transmission ended. Danny and Velsera looked at each other, both amazed and terrified. Kylan had just challenged the entire High Council. It could go very badly or it could change everything. The council debated for 3 days. The vote was close. The younger members were moved by Kylan's speech. The older members worried about tradition. The military members focused on practical benefits. The religious members quoted ancient texts. In the end, Elder Vexnor cast the deciding vote. The same elder who had been most opposed to Danny from the beginning. He stood slowly, his old scales dull gray, and addressed the council. "I have lived a very long time," he said. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have seen traditions that once seemed unbreakable fade away, and I have learned that the strength of an empire isn't in its rigid rules. It's in its people. Our queen is strong. Her son is wise beyond his years. And this human, whatever else he may be, has brought healing to our royal family. I vote to grant the exception." The council approved the relationship with conditions. Danny had to complete his cultural education. He had to formally renounce any claim to the throne, ensuring Kylan remained the sole heir. And he would be given a title that made him the queen's consort but gave him no political power. Danny agreed to everything without hesitation. 6 months later, a bonding ceremony was held on Celestial Harbor. It was a blend of Zephrani and human traditions, witnessed by representatives from across the galaxy. Kylan carried the rings, beaming with pride. Lisa cried happy tears. Even Ambassador Torvan attended, though he looked uncomfortable the whole time. When it was Danny's turn to speak, he kept it short. He thanked the council for their trust. He thanked the Zephrani people for accepting him. And he thanked Velsara and Kylan for reminding him that love doesn't need permission. It just needs courage. He also spoke to his late wife, thanking her for making him promise to keep living, and promising her he would honor her memory by being the best partner and father he could be. The years that followed weren't always easy. There were cultural misunderstandings. There were political opponents who still questioned the match. There were the normal struggles of any blended family. But they faced everything together. Danny and Velsara's relationship had an unexpected effect on the galaxy. Other species started questioning their own rigid traditions. Several diplomatic marriages between previously incompatible species were approved. Humans gained new respect in the Federation. The Zephrani Empire began a slow cultural shift toward valuing personal fulfillment alongside duty. 5 years after that first night in the maintenance corridor, Danny was back to his old routine. He still cleaned floors 1 day a week, insisting it kept him grounded. The station staff found it amusing that a royal consort still pushed a mop around, but Danny didn't care. He was mopping the diplomatic corridor when he saw a familiar scene. A Luxian mother stood nearby, looking exhausted. Her teenage son had just been expelled from another school. She looked hopeless. Danny paused in his mopping and walked over with a kind smile. "I might be able to help with that," he said. The mother looked at him skeptically. He was just a janitor with a mop. What could he possibly do? Danny smiled. He'd heard that before. That evening, he returned to his quarters where Velsara was reading to Kylan. The 9-year-old prince was technically too old for bedtime stories, but he had convinced his parents to read just one more. They were reading from a special book, a collection of Earth and Zephrani tales compiled together. Danny sat down on the other side of Kylan, joining his family. Velsara's scales glowed soft colors of contentment. Kylan leaned against Danny's shoulder, safe and happy. Danny looked at his wife and stepson and thought about the journey from janitor to prince's companion to royal consort. He thought about his late wife and hoped she would be proud. He thought about how the most important qualifications weren't on a resume, but in a willing heart. Velsara looked up from the book and caught his expression. "What are you thinking?" she asked quietly. Danny smiled. "That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The story ended there, in that quiet moment, with a human, a Zephrani queen, and a prince who would one day rule with the wisdom of both worlds. On the wall behind them hung a picture of Danny in his janitor uniform on his first day, a reminder that extraordinary journeys often begin with simple acts of kindness. And in the maintenance corridor, a small rubber ball still sat on a shelf, kept there by Kylan as a memory of the night a janitor sat down beside a crying prince and changed everything,